Welcome to a world where nothing is as it seems. Welcome to Fake Britain.
Get on! Get out! On the floor now! Put your hands behind your back now!
Here at the Fake Britain house, we'll reveal the fakes that are flooding the market, conning people like you and me and making money for the criminals. We'll investigate the fraudsters who are selling us something that isn't real and could be dangerous, and we'll help you avoid falling for a fake. Today on Fake Britain, the fake taxis putting passengers in danger.
He wasn't a good driver at all, and I think he was taking risks with our lives.
If you're planning to take a minicab, there are some things you can check to make sure it's safe. Does the vehicle have a taxi licence? Does the company have an operator's licence? And does the driver have a private hire licence? In many parts of the country, you can now do these checks with the authorities easily online. And it's worth checking. Look at this. It's a booking form from a cab company. It says fully licensed and insured for private hire, but those claims are fake. Fake minicabs across the UK are putting people's lives at risk. There are now around 250,000 vehicles with taxi licences on our roads. About a third of those are hackney carriages or taxis. But 150,000 of them are private hire vehicles or minicabs. As Sarah Thompson from Northamptonshire found out, some of those minicabs are fake, unlicensed and potentially dangerous. One night, Sarah was out with her friends in Birmingham.
We went out on the Saturday night, we were staying at a hotel, and I got a lot drunker than I was expecting to get. I thought it was best that I'd go home to the hotel, sleep it off.
Thinking she was doing the right thing, Sarah headed for a taxi rank and found a minicab.
I asked him to take me back to the hotel because I thought it would be safer to get into a taxi than try and find my way home walking.
But the minicab driver didn't take her straight back to the hotel. Instead, he pulled up on a side road.
I remember him climbing over into the passenger side and leaning over me, started kissing me. And I remember gripping the seat, just thinking I need to just let what happens happen, because I'll probably end up worse if I try and fight him. Sort of froze in fear.
Sarah was seriously assaulted by the minicab driver, but she managed to escape.
So I got out of the taxi and I was just walking up the street in a bit of a daze. And then that's when it hit me. I started running and panicking, and I seen this car coming down towards me, so I ran out in the road in front of that to make it stop. And two girls got out the back, and they helped me, and I told them what had happened, and they called the police. I started panicking then that I didn't know what had happened, because I couldn't remember it all. I don't remember anything till I woke up, and there was all these police officers and paramedics around me.
Sarah's attacker was driving an unlicensed minicab. He was caught and jailed for 5 years. But there are other risks that come with fake minicabs, from being overcharged to being driven in a car that's uninsured. In Birmingham, it's PC Dave Humpherson's job to keep minicab passengers safe. Tonight, he's leading Operation Amethyst, which is tasked with cracking down on private hire vehicles that are operating illegally. PC Humpherson is concerned that some minicab drivers might be using fake plates.
They may be a revoked licensed driver that at some stage has been caught for an offence, no longer have a licence. So what they will do is they will get hold of some either fake plates or they may have stolen some plates. They'll put them on the vehicle. Straight away it looks like a licensed vehicle and they will take journeys. Members of the public aren't going to look at those plates, or they may look at the plates and not question the driver. They're just happy that, well, I'm getting in the vehicle, I'm getting home.
Tonight, the officers are patrolling the streets in search of fake and illegal minicab drivers.
I'm going to drop 2 officers off on foot and I'm going to get into a position where I can observe them approaching vehicles.
The undercover officers pretend to be late-night partygoers in search of a cab. The one that takes their fare doesn't know that he'll shortly be pulled over by a police bike.
Alpha 1, subject vehicle is a silver Mercedes. No deviation, speed 30, Newhall Street.
The driver was later questioned and it was discovered he was operating in the wrong county, which is illegal. Later, another team stops a second minicab driver who's found to be taking illegal fares.
Can you just follow me at the roundabout, just back into Morrison's, there's a stop sign there.
He knows there's some money to be made. It's very easy money. He'll take them, he'll take the risk. And unfortunately, on this occasion for him, it's police officers that he's picked up. We've caught 4 pliers so far tonight. We've only been out a few hours. No fake plates that we're aware of. I've got no doubts that there are people about in the city tonight.
It's a good result for the team tasked with catching illegal minicabs. They know that the fakes are out there. In Bradford, Josh Ripley was violently beaten unconscious after getting into a fake minicab. And one night, PC Jason Dooley came face to face with one. He saw a minicab being flagged down by passengers and taking the fare. Plying for hire is illegal, so PC Dooley followed the car on his police bike and pulled over the driver.
Spoke through the open window and I just asked, lads, have you booked this taxi? And they both said, no, we're just doing it now. I've then asked them to get out of the taxi because it's not booked and the driver's committed an offence. I've then told the driver to follow me.
But the minicab driver had other ideas and sped off, leaving PC Dooley no option but to give chase.
I heard a wheel spin. He then went the wrong side of the road through a no entry sign. And when he got onto the dual carriageway, he slowed down. I think he realised that I'm not getting away from a police motorcyclist, so I'm just going to give up. And that's when I've arrested him for dangerous driving.
PC Dooley was about to discover that this minicab driver wasn't all he appeared to be.
He had taxi plates on the car. It was emblazoned with taxi door numbers. I assumed it was a legal taxi.
But after arresting the driver, the truth emerged.
The plates displayed were expired and they weren't in his name. Mr. Elahi wasn't a taxi driver. Mr. Elahi's car was not a taxi. He stuck these stickers on his vehicle to give the impression to members of the public that it was a private hire vehicle. But when we interviewed Mr. Elahi, he stated that it was a one-off, that he had only done it once, but we proved that it was numerous times, possibly near to the 100 times he was using this vehicle as a fake taxi.
Fake cab driver Babu Elahi admitted dangerous driving, fraud by false representation and driving without insurance. He was jailed for 4 years, suspended for 2 years and banned from driving for 12 months. As far as PC Dooley is concerned, this is just the tip of the iceberg. In 1 year alone, around 100 drivers in Birmingham have been prosecuted and banned from the roads or given 6 penalty points with fines approaching £2,000.
There are fake taxis out there. If you get into the rear of a fake taxi, they are not checked, they're not monitored, so they could be anybody, and it's a danger to the public.
Coming up, we see how trading standards in the southwest cracked their largest ever fake minicab case.
It's a massive deception.
The work involved in producing these fake logs is enormous.
Earlier on Fake Britain, we saw how fake minicabs on British roads are putting passengers in extreme danger.
Mr. Elahi wasn't a taxi driver. Mr. Elahi's car was not a taxi.
In Cornwall, Norman Roper and his wife Eleanor were about to find themselves embroiled in one of the largest ever fake taxi cases seen by trading standards. Norman has limited mobility and so has to take minicabs to the airport when he goes on holiday.
We're planning to go to Florida, and travelling from Cornwall to Gatwick is quite a job. We wanted to find a local firm.
Norman needed a reliable minicab with enough space for his scooter and luggage. He found a company called Cornwall Flight Connections, which also went by the name of Chimea Flight Connections, not to be confused with any company of a similar name.
One of the questions we asked was, do they carry wheelchairs and mobility scooters? And they assured us they did. I'd read the advert and I'd seen that they were VAT registered. It all seemed quite legitimate.
Getting to Gatwick Airport in a minicab would be expensive. Norman was quoted £400, but he was willing to pay that for the peace of mind provided by a professional driver in a spacious car. The minicab arrived in the early hours of the morning of their holiday, but it wasn't quite the ride that Norman had been expecting.
I was disappointed with the condition of the vehicle. It was, I would say, scruffy. And he opened the boot, it was full of his own personal belongings. Golf clubs, suitcase. It made loading our luggage quite difficult.
Norman struggled to fit the mobility scooter into the cab, leaving only one option for the disappointed couple.
In fact, my wife was in the back seat of the vehicle with luggage, and I sat in the front passenger seat. Didn't seem right. It didn't seem the way I would expect a chauffeur-driven taxi to be.
Despite the crowded journey to the airport, the couple went on to enjoy a great holiday together. Upon their return, they were collected by a car from Cornwall Flight Connections. Again, it was scruffy, but that was to be the least of their worries.
He spent a lot of time on the phone, using a mobile phone, and also reading documents on the passenger seat of the car while he was driving at 70, 80 miles an hour and wandering in and out of his lane. That worried me. He wasn't a good driver at all. He shouldn't be driving a taxi. He was taking risks, and I think he was taking risks with our lives. Had there have been an accident, we would have been in real difficulty.
It was a very distressing journey for Norman and his wife. But it turned out Norman wasn't the only passenger that the minicab firm had taken for a ride. A few miles away at Cornwall County Council, licensing officer Graham Bailey and fair trading manager Nigel Strick were getting some very worrying phone calls from members of the public.
The complaints started off with the condition of the vehicles. They were dirty, shabby, door handles hanging off. They also mentioned that the drivers were discourteous, that they were late, that sometimes they missed their flights.
If the drivers weren't well turned out, it was possibly because they were working dangerously long hours, sometimes with disastrous consequences.
This log shows very clearly is some of the gruelling schedules that some of the drivers are being expected to work during the week. The Heathrow pickup at 11:35 at night and another Heathrow pickup at 6:20 in the morning. Clearly not a safe setup.
We found evidence that they were involved in road traffic accidents, they picked up speeding tickets, and we had reports from other taxi drivers that they were actually falling asleep behind the wheel and that sometimes had to be woken up by the other drivers banging on the glass.
Now, concerned about the danger to passengers, Graham and Nigel began to investigate Cornwall Flight Connections. They arranged for undercover officers to pose as customers.
We did a little bit of detective work. We made arrangements to be picked up at a local drinking establishment in Truro and were duly picked up by a vehicle which was unmarked, unplated. The vehicle was pulled over by a marked police vehicle, and the driver confessed that he was driving for Flight Connections, but the vehicle wasn't licensed and he wasn't the licensed driver.
Graham and Nigel now had all the evidence they needed to raid the company.
Trading Standards officers here organised search warrants of both the office where the taxi firm was operating from and from the private homes of the people behind the business. What we found was an enormous amount of paperwork, and it became very evident very quickly that pretty much the whole business was set up as a fraud.
It might look just like a scruffy office, but this was the nerve centre of a fake minicab business empire.
We took away thousands and thousands of booking forms. It's covered in fake claims. They're claiming to be fully licensed. They're claiming to be VAT registered. They're claiming to be insured for private hire.
A 5-year licence for a minicab firm can cost up to £2,000. This firm clearly didn't want to pay, and they were saving thousands more by not paying insurance.
It's amazing, really, though, isn't it? 10 drivers in this book, none of those licensed.
The drivers didn't even have operators' licences, and of course the minicab firm didn't want that to be known. So they created fake driver records to cover their tracks if the company was ever checked. The fake log made it look as though drivers with valid operators' licences were carrying out the journeys.
Here's a list of drivers with all their appropriate taxi driver licence numbers here, but actually none of these drivers actually undertook any of the journeys for the firm.
The drivers with operators' licences listed inside were actually genuine cab drivers. But a second logbook, kept under lock and key, contained the truth, that fake cab drivers were actually driving the passengers around.
Now, we know that all the drivers in this log were not licensed. The firm have produced fake logs, same journeys, but they're declaring drivers that didn't actually conduct the journeys.
It's a massive deception.
The work involved in producing these false logs is enormous.
Further investigation uncovered the huge scale of the fake minicab operation. It was making enormous profits at the expense of unwitting passengers.
I think the scale of the operation took us all by surprise. We estimate that they've defrauded people to the tune of £1.2 million, and then on top of that, they've avoided almost £300,000 worth of VAT payments.
By now, Trading Standards knew there was more than enough evidence to go after the bosses of the company, Martin Perks and Christopher Perks. But bringing them in was going to be easier said than done.
The two principal offenders behind the firm decided to pack their bags and run off to France. So we applied for a European arrest warrant, and they were arrested on a campsite and returned to the UK in handcuffs. Once they were back in the UK, they were subject to electronic tagging and curfew orders to make sure they didn't run off again.
Finally brought to justice before Truro Crown Court, Martin Perks was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Christopher Perks was sentenced to 12 months in prison, suspended for 2 years.
These people have cheated and lied, and at the end of the day, they were gambling with most people's lives.